Welcome to This Explainer. Right off the bat, we're looking at a story that completely defies everything we're taught to expect from tales of war. I mean, when you and I picture World War II stories, we usually imagine this heroic march toward victory, right? A clear beginning, a gripping middle, a triumphant end. But this is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. So instead of heroism, we're going to explore the story of war exactly the way trauma actually remembers it. Totally broken, scattered, constantly repeated, and honestly impossible to fully explain.
Okay, let's dive right into this bizarre reality. Our protagonist is Billy Pilgrim, and literally the very first thing we learn about Billy is that he has come unstuck in time. Just imagine that for a second. He doesn't experience life in a straight line. One moment he's going to sleep as an elderly widower, and the very next time he opens his eyes, he wakes up on his wedding day. Billy isn't your traditional square-jawed hero. He is completely ill-prepared for the horrors of war. Yet, he survives. And the cost of that survival is his anchor to linear time.
Before we follow Billy any further, we really have to understand the author's own struggle here. The narrator, who's essentially a stand-in for Vonnegut himself, tells us that the war parts of this story are mostly true. See, he actually survived the massive firebombing of Dresden as a prisoner of war. For years, he thought it'd be incredibly easy to write about. He figured all he had to do was just report what he saw, but the words wouldn't come. Because, well, how do you turn a massacre into a neat linear story? How do you make sense of something that literally shatters your entire perception of reality?
So, the narrative drops us right into the chaotic mind of a guy navigating absolute destruction. Billy is an American infantry scout lost behind German lines. He's freezing, he's terrified, and he's dressed completely wrong for winter. After witnessing unimaginable devastation, his mind essentially fractures. Now, time travel might literally be real within the context of the story, or it might just be the absolute only way a terrified young man's mind can cope with a universe that suddenly makes zero sense.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how Billy experiences his life. He plots his existence completely non-linearly. One second he's in 1944, stuck as a prisoner in a dark boxcar. Then, bam, it's 1967, and he claims he's been kidnapped by aliens and put on display in a zoo. Then suddenly, it's 1955, and he's a wealthy optometrist. Then, he's thrust violently back to 1945, huddled underground during a firestorm. Every single time he blinks, he's thrown into another random chapter of his life, completely powerless to stop it.
During his kidnapping, Billy learns this fascinating, totally alien philosophy from his captors on Tralfamadore. Us Earthlings, we view time like a string of beads, right? One moment follows the next, but the Tralfamadorians see time permanently, all at once. It's like looking at a massive stretch of the Rocky Mountains. You can just look at any peak you want, whenever you want. To them, there is absolutely no free will. The moment is structured the way it's structured. It cannot be changed. It just simply is.
Which brings us to, honestly, one of the most famous and haunting aspects of this whole story. So it goes. Whenever death is mentioned in the text, and I mean whether it's the horrific boiling of schoolgirls, a soldier freezing in the snow, or even just a natural passing, the narrator inserts this exact phrase. It stems directly from that alien belief we just talked about. A person is only dead in that particular moment, but they are still very much alive in all the others. It acts as this quiet, detached resignation, a really profound sigh of acceptance in a story that's just overflowing with death.
So how does a person cope when they finally return to normal life? Well, after the war, Billy goes back to studying optometry, but he suffers a massive nervous collapse. He gets sent to a veterans hospital near Lake Placid. His world is completely shattered, and Billy, along with the other damaged veterans around him, is desperately trying to reinvent himself and his universe. Because the normal rules of Earth, they just no longer apply to men who have seen what they've seen. They need something entirely new to create even the illusion of order.
In that hospital, Billy's fragmented journey is anchored by a few key figures who help him build that illusion. You've got Elliot Rosewater, a fellow damaged veteran who introduces Billy to the pure escapism of science fiction. Through him, Billy discovers Kilgore Trout, a writer with absolutely terrible prose, but these wild, visionary ideas about an uncaring universe. Then there's Edgar Derby. He's this deeply decent, older high school teacher who serves as a POW alongside Billy. And of course, you have the alien Tralfamadorians. Together, all these figures give Billy a bizarre but totally necessary framework to navigate his overwhelming feelings of meaninglessness.
Okay, let's move forward and see how this builds to the central tragedy of the story. Billy and the other American prisoners are transported to Dresden. Now, at this point in the war, Dresden is a remarkably beautiful city. It's filled with art and seemingly totally untouched by bombings. To these exhausted prisoners, it actually feels like a miraculous safe haven. They're taken to a cement building inside a massive compound. The simple address they're given is Schlachthöfe, Slaughterhouse-Five.
This specific location basically becomes their entire world. When the air raid sirens finally howl across the city, the American prisoners and their guards are herded deep down into an echoing meat locker hollowed out of living rock. Down there, sitting among a few dressed animal carcasses, it is surprisingly quiet, a real safe shelter. But right above them, Allied planes are dropping high explosives and incendiaries, creating an absolute firestorm that turns this seemingly safe city into a roaring inferno.
When they finally emerge from the meat locker, the world as they knew it is just gone. The city of Dresden literally looks like the surface of the moon. The narrator estimates that about 130,000 people died in the firestorm raging right above them. But remember, like we said at the start, this is not a heroic war story. The author completely subverts the traditional hero arc here. You'd expect Edgar Derby, that decent, patriotic older soldier who survived the worst massacre in European history, to go on to receive medals, right? Instead, in the ruins days after the bombing, Derby is caught taking a teapot. He is given a quick trial by the Germans and executed by a firing squad. It is the ultimate absurd anticlimax of war. A good man surviving a literal firestorm only to be shot over a piece of porcelain. So it goes.
The narrator is actually incredibly transparent about his own work here. He tells us flat out that his book is a failure. He says it had to be a failure because it was written by a pillar of salt. If you know your biblical references, this is about Lot's wife, who was turned into a pillar of salt for looking back at the destruction of her city. Vonnegut is basically telling us that looking back at immense trauma doesn't heal you. It paralyzes you. It just turns you to salt.
So the crucial point is this entirely sobering realization. There is nothing intelligent to say about a massacre. The author forces us to accept that after such immense, senseless destruction, everyone who is supposed to speak is dead. They never say anything or want anything ever again. All the explanations, the military justifications, the geopolitical maneuverings, they all just fail. When the flames finally die down and the ruins cool, there is only absolute, unexplainable silence.
And in all that quiet, you know what's actually left? The book famously ends with the sound of a bird. Putuit? It's a completely meaningless chirp answering an unanswerable question. So if we review this story as a whole, let's look at the holes in the structure. Is it a realistic portrayal of war? Factually? Obviously not. It involves time travel and alien zoos. But emotionally and psychologically, it is profoundly, devastatingly realistic. It perfectly models how trauma shatters a person's timeline and how the brain desperately scrambles to find any framework to explain the unexplainable. Billy Pilgrim's journey reminds us that the deepest wounds of war leave us grasping for words, finding only the silence of the ruins, and a bird asking a question that literally no one can answer. What framework do we use when our own world shatters?